Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Twins Ticket Podcast. I am your host, Tom Froming, aka TF Twins. This show is brought to you by my Ko-fi supporters, but we'll talk about more about that a little bit later. I want to get right into the meat and potatoes of this episode first. Some of you may remember I used to call my live stream shows on YouTube Twins Ticket. Well, I'm also recycling another concept, which is updating my Twins prospect list on the first Monday of the month. So we're going to get into that. But I just want to get right into a controversial take here. Just going straight after it. I still have Emmanuel Rodriguez over Luke Keaschall on my prospect list. And that's probably controversial for good reason. I think this is a great debate to have right now. You know, the early goings here, it's very one-sided. It's Luke Keaschall all the way, even though, of course, he got injured on that hit by pitch. Emmanuel Rodriguez missed some games with a thumb injury, and he's had lots of those. So it's not like even Rodriguez has a huge advantage there, but at least he didn't miss much time. Rodriguez hasn't hit for any kind of power yet this year and is striking out in about a third of his plate appearances, which is fairly usual for him. But he also has a walk percentage of nearly 20 and a 379 OBP. So it's not all bad for Emmanuel Rodriguez. He's doing some stuff, and he's doing the stuff we've seen him do a lot. Obviously, Keaschall has been more exciting thus far. That was such a great showing from him in the major leagues with the Minnesota Twins. But I'm not sure what to make of him as a fielder. And that's a big part of the picture. You know, time will tell. He's recovering from Tommy John still. You know, even being on the Twins, he still wasn't fully a full go in the field. So I'm trying not to hold that against him or what I've seen of him in the field, keeping in mind that this is a guy who's not fully healthy, and he wasn't fully last year. You know, he was playing with an elbow injury last season. So I don't know what Luke Keaschall looks like in the field, a fully healthy Luke Keaschall. That's a really big part of the picture. If things continue to trend this way, as they have on the field, I will swap these guys. I will have Luke Keaschall above Emmanuel Rodriguez for sure. I'm just not there yet, and I'm really curious to see what Emmanuel Rodriguez does this season. I'm not really holding the early going against him to too much of a degree. And again, he's walking a lot, and he's getting on base. We're just not seeing any kind of power for him yet. So I wanted to start out with that, kind of talking about the top. I do still have Walker Jenkins above them at number 1, in case you were wondering. Jenkins hasn't really played much due to an ankle injury. But let's talk about another feature I want to add, something new. Let's just get into something new since we're doing recycled stuff so far. Guys I'd most likely to promote. I want to do this episode of updating my prospect list on the first Monday of each month. But I also want to talk about this, because this gets outside of prospects, and I think that gets under-discussed sometimes, and it also allows me to talk about some guys maybe I wouldn't usually have. So we're going to go level by level. So starting off with the St. Paul Saints, the guy I'd be most likely to promote from the St. Paul Saints to the Minnesota Twins would be Carson McCusker, which might be surprising to some of you who've interacted with me in my YouTube channel comments. Because I'm not all that, to be honest, I'm not all that optimistic that Carson McCusker would be successful against Major League pitching. It's going to be tough. He's a right-handed hitting corner outfielder, mostly right field, signed out of Indy Ball, turns 27 later this month. So this isn't some kind of young, up-and-coming hotshot prospect. Carson McCusker is about to be 27 years old. He's hitting .319 with a .385 OBP and a .606 slugging percentage for the Saints. That's a .991 OPS with 7 homers in 27 games. He takes some of the worst swings you will ever see. It is Miguel Sano-like in there sometimes. He's got a 31.4 K percentage in AAA. The funny thing about him, though, is he might be the greatest timeout taker that I've ever seen. He will miss a ball by 2 feet. He will call timeout, collect himself, get back in the box, and hit a ball 450 feet. It's incredible to see. I've seen him do it a couple times this year already. I really like watching Carson McCusker, a guy who's 6'8", playing the outfield. Obviously, that means his strike zone is just enormous, and I think that's working against him some. He could be a difference maker in some games, though. Even if it's hit or miss, even if it's inconsistent, he's going to run into one every once in a while. And this Twins roster, as it's currently constructed, without Matt Wallner in particular, they could use a guy who's dangerous like that. but he's going to be a complete ghost in some other games. So you're getting all or nothing from him, and there's going to be some really ugly stretches. But I do think if I was to pick anybody to promote, he'd be the guy, because that element is what the Twins, I think, right now are most missing. But should call out that Royce Lewis should be returning anytime soon. That might change the dynamic of their lineup. We'll see. But hoping that Carson McCusker, either way, continues to play well for the Saints. Moving on down to Wichita, the Double-A team, the guy I would pick to promote from Wichita to St. Paul is Tanner Schobel, an infielder, mostly a third baseman, who drew some Spencer Steer comparisons earlier in his minor league career. Turns 24 in like a month. He's been playing well as he has in Double-A, but he's not exactly lighting it up. He's hitting .274 with a .336 on-base percentage and a .443 slugging. That's a .779 OPS. He's approaching 200 games played for Wichita, so he's been there for a long time. That's a big motivation for me in picking him. A guy they invested in, a former number 68 overall pick who got $1 million signing bonus. Kind of finally showing some signs in Wichita. Might as well move him up before things kind of turn south or sour. You let a guy sit for too long in one place, things might go a little sour. I'm curious to see. And there's things he can do. He can play third, he can play short, he can play second base. You probably put him in the outfield and he could handle himself if you wanted to. So he could help out with the Saints. Guy from Cedar Rapids, who I would be promoting up to Double-A Wichita, is Gabriel Gonzalez, the 21-year-old right-handed hitting left fielder that the Twins acquired in the Jorge Polanco trade from Seattle. He had a rough first year in the org, posting a .706 OPS in 76 high A games with Cedar Rapids. Like Schobel, this is his third year at the same level. He has 143 games at high A, and Gabriel Gonzalez hitting .302 with a .368 OBP and a .448 slugging. That's an .816 OPS. Not exactly like lighting the world on fire or anything, but I probably would have actually started him in Wichita. Even though he is still only 21, it's not like he's too old to be in Cedar Rapids, but just kind of give him a kick in the butt and say, hey, this is what we think of you. This is where we think you should be. Go out and perform. And then finally, the guy for Fort Myers who I would like to see promoted to Cedar Rapids if I had to choose would be Jay Thomason, the Twins' 17th round pick from last year's draft out of Air Force, who is a 23-year-old third baseman, second baseman, first baseman. He's been among the better hitters in the Florida State League so far, hitting .247 with a .431 OBP and a .558 slugging percentage. That is a .989 OPS for, again, Jay Thomason, who they drafted. All of his draft class buddies are in Cedar Rapids. Now that's kind of a case to say, hey, maybe he should be in Cedar Rapids as well, but it's also, you can say there's sort of a logjam. There's a lot of infielders up there. Even with some guys hurt, there's not a lot of room for him. He takes some massive cuts, Jay Thomason. I like watching him hit. And he's got nearly as many walks as strikeouts. He's got 21 walks and 23 strikeouts for a guy who just swings out of his shoes constantly. He's also 7 for 8 in stolen base attempts, so getting some things done on the bases as well. So that was my rundown of the prospect at each full season affiliate I would promote if it was up to me. Happened to be all hitters this time. Didn't do that intentionally, but before we start with some of the prospect list discussion, by the time you're hearing this, I will have posted my entire updated top 50 Twins prospect list on my Ko-fi page. This will not be behind a paywall. It is free for everyone to see. That's ko-fi.com/tftwins. I'll also put a link down in the description. So I'm not going to go through that entire list, and you can see it on my Ko-fi page. I'm going to give you a couple guys who moved up, a couple guys who are holding steady that might raise an eyebrow, and then a couple guys who are moving down. So moving up, Dason Hill. Dason Hill, left-handed starting pitcher for the Mighty Muscles, 6'5", 19-year-old guy. Didn't know a ton of what to expect or a ton about him. We haven't seen him pitch in pro ball yet. I moved him up from number 13 to number 7 on my prospect list. Number 69 overall pick from last year's draft. I'm very excited about this tall, lean young man. In-game velo. You hear a guy, oh, this guy throws 97, this guy throws 98, whatever. You never know if that means if it's actually in a game situation or if it's just like some driveline type facility where the guy's in basketball shorts essentially and throwing in a gym and just maxing out to look cool. That's fine. That's all fun. But I question that when I hear that about a prospect, especially a high school pitcher who, hasn't been in pro ball, hasn't, been on a mound where there's been tracking in game. But he hit 98 miles per hour with the Hawkeye tracking, StatCast stuff, the same stuff they use in Major League Baseball. 98 miles per hour, Dason Hill has topped out at. He's a sinker, slider, changeup, curveball guy, and a pretty solid mix of those 4 pitches. It's not like he's a 2-pitch guy who's trying to get a feel of those other 2 pitches. He's a pretty legitimate 4-pitch guy. Obviously, all of these pitches have some work to do. It's not like you could put this guy anywhere near the major leagues and he'd be successful. He's 19 years old. But he has pitched well. And, the Twins have been really careful with a lot of starting pitchers, and especially early. I think it's really interesting. They could have been extremely careful with this guy, but he's pitched into the 4th inning in 3 starts. And I know if you don't watch a lot of minor league baseball, especially a lot of the Twins system, that doesn't sound impressive. But, Marco Raya's in AAA, and they're still not letting him go into the 4th inning quite often. And they let Dason Hill do it in all of his starts up until his last one. What happened in that one? He left it in the 2nd inning, and he wasn't getting lit up. He wasn't throwing a lot of strikes. It's kind of easy to imagine that was possibly due to an injury. They're clearly going to be super careful with him, so any little tweak, anything, they're going to take him out and probably skip a start, at least. So at this time, he's not been placed on the injured list, so I don't think there's any reason to be really reactionary to him having that short start last time, but something to be aware of with Dason Hill. If you're looking at box scores, keeping an eye out for him, just know that he might miss a start or 2, or not. We'll see. But Dason Hill moved up from my number 13 prospect to my number 7 prospect. That is a big move. And I should call out, I've tried to restrain myself, because when I look back at all of the worst prospect list updates I've ever done, it's always regarded in April, May, and it's always, I got way too excited about how somebody started. But again, this is the first impression we're getting from Dason Hill. So me putting him at 13 was like, I'm excited about what I hear about this guy. I like the way he looks, but I'm curious to see what the end game looks like. And I love what the end game looked like, and I put him up to 7. Kyle DeBarge, bit of a different story. Guy from the same draft class, the number 33 overall pick last year, 21-year-old utility man now. People smarter than me told me I was too low on him, and they were right. I had Kyle DeBarge at number 17. I'm moving up to number 12. He has looked like a completely different player this year. Sometimes guys, after the college season and the draft, they're a little burnt out, and then you send them down to Florida, Fort Myers. And I know DeBarge played his college ball in Louisiana, so he's probably used to that kind of weather, but it can be a grind, and they can be wearing down, and maybe that's what's going on with Kyle DeBarge, because he looks completely different. He's hitting .290 with a .410 OBP and a .500 slugging. That's a .910 OPS for Cedar Rapids, with more walks than strikeouts, and is 14 for 14 in stolen base attempts. Obviously, minor league performance isn't everything. There are some guys that play extremely well in the minor leagues and then fall flat on their faces, and their kind of performance doesn't match their tools. I don't think that's what's going on here with Kyle DeBarge. This is a hot streak for sure. I'm not saying I think he can do this over a full season, but he's earned a lot more respect from me, and it also sort of tells me that the people who were telling me I was wrong knew what they were talking about too, to be completely honest. So, he's mostly played second base, but there have been 3 starts at shortstop and 2 each in left field and center field, which is a little bit new for him. He's been mostly an infielder. That could help him out a lot, playing the outfield. So those are my 2 moving up guys I wanted to feature, but I also want to call out that I did bump up starting pitchers Darren Bowen and Jose Olivares into my top 30. So those are some names to know as well. The 2 guys I put in my holding steady category, and again, just want to remind you that my entire updated top 50 will be available on my Ko-fi page. But holding steady, Brandon Winokur. I'm not moving Brandon Winokur down. I think he moved down a spot because Dason Hill jumped him, but that was more to do with Hill's performance than Winokur's. 20-year-old former third-round pick playing in cold weather for the first time, which I think is important to call out. Well, at least to my knowledge, for the first time. But this is a California guy who played with Fort Myers last year, playing with Cedar Rapids this year. Probably the first time he's experienced this kind of weather. He has a 587 OPS. I'm not going to hide from that. That is terrible. He's also had some rough moments in the field too, which that's concerning on its own. But outside of that overall performance, a big thing with Winokur is his strikeouts, and his K rate is down from 28% last year to 24.4% so far this year. And his walk rate is up from 8.3% to 12.6% this year. So basically his K-minus walk percentage is down from 19.7 to 11.8. That's usually a stat I share for pitchers, but I think that illustrates how big of a deal this is for Winokur to be taking much more professional and reliable plate appearances. K rate down, walk rate up, no production so far. That's not followed, but I'm pretty confident that's going to come. This is a dangerous power hitter, Brandon Winokur. He's going to produce. Certainly not moving him up, but didn't move him down, react on this slow start. I'm curious to see what he does this month, and I'm excited to see what he does for Cedar Rapids. Still thinking he's going to be big things from Brandon Winokur. The other holding steady guy I have is Andrew Moore. These are maybe two of my favorite prospects, so maybe no surprise. Brandon Winokur I love watching. Andrew Morris I love watching. 23-year-old going through instructive struggles in AAA is what I'm going to call it. Instructive struggles for Andrew Morris. He's got a 4.57 ERA and a 1.71 whip. That's rough. In 21 and 2/3 innings. Opponents are hitting .322 against him, but it's with a 400 BABIP, a 400 batting average on balls in play. He's only given up one home run, Andrew Morris. So it's not like he's getting clobbered out there. If that was the case, I'd maybe be looking at this a little bit differently. Kind of like with Winokur, you look at the production, it doesn't look good, but you look under the hood and looking at some of these other numbers, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, his approach looks good. Andrew Morris, he's not getting his teeth kicked in. He's given up one home run. Also, he hit 99.3 miles per hour in game, Andrew Morris, and has thrown 25 pitches in excess of 97 miles per hour. That is impressive velo from anybody. That's a step up from Andrew Morris that, I anticipate. I'm excited about that, and maybe that's part of it too. Maybe he's not fully caught up to himself and sort of used to how it feels and how his outings go when he can throw this hard. Maybe he even needs to dial it back a bit. I don't know. That's David Festa has had to do that a bit. I think he threw harder in Cedar Rapids than he's been throwing the past couple of years, and I think that's because he needed to dial it back a bit to lengthen his outings, be a little bit more consistent. Perhaps now that Morris has shown he can hit 99, they can tell him, maybe take a couple ticks off. We'll see. I'm not sure. Time will tell, but those were two guys holding steady that I didn't feel like moving down despite them not having the greatest Aprils. Moving down, there are guys I am going to move down, though. They probably are a little bit obvious. The super obvious one is Diego Cartaya, moving down from number 25 to number 38. Something is wrong. Something is not right with Diego Cartaya. I don't think it's just physical. Could be as simple as struggling to adjust to a new org. That could be. We've seen guys in the past, go trading from their first org, their only org they've ever known, and being traded to a totally new organization. It's kind of a culture shock sometimes. Some guys react to it differently than others. Diego Cartaya has struck out in 23 of his 38 plate appearances. That's 60% of his plate appearances have ended in strikeout. He's not the best contact hitter ever, but he had a 28.3 K percentage last year. It's not like he's that's higher, but it's not alarming. Something's wrong with him. He was removed from the 40-man roster, still only 23 years old. I still felt like it was legit to move him down from 25 to 38. Not just going to completely brush that. It's an alarming performance. But I still think there's something there with this guy. I think he can play. The other guy moved down was Junior Severino from number 31 to 39. He looks to me like he may have slimmed down some, which was encouraging. Perhaps that was in preparation to play some outfield. He's been playing some outfield toward the end of last year and then a bit this year. But is that where the power went? He has not hit a home run in 16 games prior to going on the IL. He had a hamstring strain. He suffered playing first base, but was not hitting for power. Had a .288 slugging percentage with no home runs. He's 25 years old now and really needs to get it in gear. Perhaps the colder weather hasn't helped. He got off to a slow start last year as well. But Junior Severino, it's really hard to continue to believe in him. I moved him down from 31 to 39. He really needs to get it going. All right, so that is the updates kind of in those categories. Again, if you want to see the entire top 50 Twins prospect list for May, I've got that at my Ko-fi shop, ko-fi.com/tftwins. I'll put a link in the description. That is free, not behind a paywall on that page. So I want to wrap things up with a little bit of general discussion here on the first ever episode of the Twins Ticket podcast. I really appreciate you being here. I promise to do better next time. Maybe we'll have a little bit more production. This is going to grow. I don't ever jump in any project having a completed vision or anything. I like to get going and figure things out as I go. YouTube's my favorite platform. I expect to be there for a really long time. I'm not going anywhere on YouTube. In fact, you might be listening to this on YouTube. I'm going to put this podcast as well as all the podcast platforms. This is going to be available on YouTube as well. But it does feel a bit of a hamster wheel, and I don't do like the sensational or clickbaity stuff, which makes things difficult to really gain traction there. I feel really fortunate to have the support I do there. I want to make that clear. But I felt like I needed to branch out. Copyright issues, too, are definitely a factor. Sharing highlights is becoming more and more difficult, which is what I do. I do love to show, more than I even like to tell. I like to show the highlights. That's how those system recaps started, really, with only highlights, me doing a bit of voiceover, and I've had to kind of gradually put myself forward in those more, and kind of begrudgingly so, not by design. The system recaps aren't going anywhere at the moment, but I know they won't be around forever. I've always known I'm not going to be able to keep up that pace forever, and it's time to explore some more sustainable options. And I feel like this might be one of them. We'll see. I'm fortunate to have a very loyal set of viewers on YouTube, but to some degree I have to rely on the algorithm to surface my videos to people. It seems like podcast audiences are more habitual and consistent. If you get somebody listening to your podcast, they're pretty ride or die, and they stick with you, and they're looking forward to your show each week. I definitely have that to some degree with the system recaps, and I really appreciate my regular viewers there. But it's tougher on YouTube, I think. We'll see. Maybe I'm talking about what I don't know. What I'm talking about here. So, I've considered starting a podcast many times, but we're so well served in this space as Twins fans. Gleamin' and the Geek, obviously the gold standard. One of the biggest and best baseball podcasts there are, really. But there are several quality shows. I really enjoy both Destination the Show and the Twins Off Daily podcast, where I've been a guest a few times. But there's others, too. We're well served here. Time will tell whether this gains traction as much as my YouTube channel or if I enjoy this as much, which is going to be the primary factor on how far this goes. But it feels good to play with something new. I'm excited. This is fun. I hope you enjoyed this. Up next, I think week 1 of each month, I'm going to do these prospect list updates. That's something, again, I've done in the past, doing that every first Monday of the month. But I think next week, I'm going to leave it open. I like having a roadmap, but I also, having predetermined themes each week seems like it might be a little bit limiting. But we'll see. Maybe next week I'll completely change my tune, and I want some kind of a roadmap to run into. But I hope to have some guests on at some point. But I want to get this thing rolling solo first. We'll see. As I've proven here, I can blab for quite a while talking to you guys by myself. So we'll see how that goes. But there are some people I'd love to talk Twins on. Again, this podcast is brought to you by my Ko-fi supporters. You can go there and donate. My goal is to both avoid putting anything I make behind a paywall and avoid including ad breaks in these episodes. We'll see how that goes. My preference at this time is for this project to be 100% fan-funded. I'm on Ko-fi, because I get to keep a much higher percentage of your funding than I would on Patreon or YouTube memberships. It's also a really good platform. It works really well. I've used it to sell my zine, so I use it to sell physical products. That's tricky. A lot has to go right. A lot can go wrong. I've been really satisfied with how that's gone. So check those out too if you haven't. I don't have anything too fresh, so I understand if nobody's going to order a 2024 season in review. That's a little bit in the rearview mirror, but really I have enjoyed making those and really appreciate Ko-fi as a platform. So kind of want to send you over there. Go check out my top 50 list. Consider donating. I get basically that entire funding, and in comparison, YouTube membership takes 30% cut on that. So something to keep in mind. Something that kind of motivated that decision, just in case you were wondering. But I really appreciate that you listened to this first podcast, hang out with me here. We'll talk again soon.